All right, so this Knife Thoughts video is going to be on these knives, and these are the Great Eastern Cutlery number 35 pattern knives made here in 2022. Now, quick caveat to that, there actually is at least one other version of the 35 that they're doing, which is an SFO or Special Factory Order for Charlie Campagna. Honestly, I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to get that one. Hopefully I will, but I'm not sure. So I thought I'd make this video and then maybe I'll do another video if I am able to get that one. But it's pretty tough to get, even compared to a normal GEC, and they're tough to get themselves. So I thought I'd make this video. Now, this is a video that's going to go into kind of the background of this pattern for Great Eastern Cutlery, as well as talk about the knives themselves. And that background is coming directly from Randy Bell, the engineer of GEC. Randy is a member of the GECC Facebook group, and he posts really great posts kind of giving some background information on how patterns come about and just things like that. And he made a post when these knives were coming out that gave a lot of that background information. So if you're a member of GECC, they're part of the group there, then this might be kind of redundant for you if you got to see Randy's post. But if you're not, then it's probably going to be interesting stuff. I've certainly found it interesting when I was watching Randy's videos. So this number 35 pattern was conceived as a scout knife. And what they did is they took the average of all of the different scout knife patterns that they could find and, got the average size. And it came out to about 5.75 inches. Now, I think that when Randy said that, he probably meant 4.75 because this knife is, actually it's 3.75. So I think he meant 3.75. It's, 5.75 would be a very, very large knife. I'll give you an example here of a very large camp knife, which is not even 5 inches. So he did say, I believe, 5.75 inches in the video, but I think that he meant 3.75 inches, which is a pretty average kind of medium-sized knife. And so what they did is they basically shortened the number 53 pattern. So here is a number 53 Cuban Stockman. This knife is from 2008, so this is a very early knife in GEC's history, but you can see that they're very similar. So these are both equal end cigar knives, basically cigar patterns. So that means that both of the bolsters are the same width. It is pretty much straight from bolster to bolster, and the bolsters are rounded. So it's an equal end cigar pattern, and the 35, which is the reverse of 53, is just a shortened version of the 53. And like I said, it was conceived as a scout knife. But the dies were cut for this pattern in 2014, but they didn't end up actually making anything on this 35 pattern until 2 years later in 2016. But the first knife that they made on the 35 pattern was the Drover, which was a special factory order for blade forms. It was the club knife for blade forms. Now, Randy didn't have one of those for his video. I don't have one for mine. I've sat out a lot of the blade forms knives recently, and I'm not sure I even qualify for them anymore. I used to participate a lot on blade forms, but I choose not to now. There's still people there with a whole lot of information and really nice people, some really nice people, kind of the topic of a whole nother video. But the point being that I never got one of those Drovers. That was the first knife made on this 35 pattern. Then, a year later in 2017, they made the Calf Pen as the first GEC, so in-house brand, appearance of the 35. Now, that was actually in the Farm and Field brand, which is what the 71 and the 21 and things like that are made in, which is the working brand, right? So the Calf Pen came in synthetic handles. and was kind of an unusual knife. Had a one-arm blade or a one-hand opening blade with the catch, and then it had a Warncliffe that I believe the Warncliffe was the blade that locked. One of the blades locked, and then there was kind of an extension that you could use as a screwdriver. So a very unusual knife. But then also in 2017, they came out with the Churchill. And this is the Churchill. This is my version, which is in the banana bone. I really like this shield here, kind of just a fun shield. But the Churchill is a pen knife, so an equal end cigar pen knife, meaning that there's a main blade on one side and then a secondary blade on the other. And it has a clip point and then a sheep foot. And one of the big things that stuck out to me about this knife is that the sheep foot is super, super thin. It cuts really, really well. So I really like that about the Churchill. And just a really kind of practical knife. You get two really usable blades in there, and it's a single spring. But after the pandemic, or after the shutdown for the pandemic in 2020, when GEC reopened, Randy said that they were supposed to build this knife, the Cattle knife, kind of upon reopening. They were set up to do it, but he said that they didn't have the steel. I'm not sure exactly what the logistical, problems were, but it sounded like they weren't able to make this knife or these knives because of logistic issues. And there were a lot of those, surrounding and continue to be due to the pandemic and the reaction to the pandemic and all of that. So instead, they made the beer and sausage knife. So the beer and sausage knife is kind of another unusual knife. So like the calf pen, it's not a super traditional knife in the tools or blades or tools that it has. So this knife has a really great spear point blade, and you'll see that it's very similar, if not exactly the same, as the one on the two knives from this year. But then as the secondary tools, it has a bottle opener and fork, which is pretty cool, makes sense. And then it has the BRR tool, which stands for Beard Refuse Removal Tool. And that's not quite as traditional, but it's really interesting. If I were to make a guess, I think that maybe the fact that they were able to cut these BRR tools out so that the teeth of one lined up within the teeth of the other, maybe that's how they got around the logistic issues and were able to make a full run of knives. Despite not having the steel to make the Scout knife. I'm not sure of that. That's conjecture on my part, but I did see when they were making these that they lined it up so that the teeth of one were inside the teeth of the other. So that might be, kind of what Randy was referring to there. This is a very unusual knife. Got kind of mixed reception. I think it's really cool. I like that GEC does this unusual type of stuff, kind of quirky, but not everyone loved it. But I think it's really cool, and I have this one in my collection here as a keeper. So that was in 2020. And then this year, in 2022, they've finally made not only the Cattle knife that they intended to make in 2020, but also the camp knife, or at least a version of a camp knife on the 35 pattern, which was the reason that the 35 pattern was made. So quite the long, kind of convoluted transition or journey that this pattern took from its inception into finally actually, being made. Now, the Cattle knife version is the 35-2322 in oxblood jigged bone. So far, this is the only version of the Cattle knife. It seems like it probably will be the only version of the Cattle knife. One thing that GEC has been doing is they have been not posting the production schedule until at the earliest, like right before the knife is released. More often when it's already in production and, even like as it's being completed, or sometimes after they've been completed and have already been shipped. So the production schedule, where it used to be something that could tell you what knives were coming so you could know which version you wanted to try to get, because it's hard enough to get one, let alone have to try to get whatever you can. That's what it used to be. Now it doesn't seem to kind of provide that same service or function. And so I'm not 100% sure that there won't be more versions of this 35 pattern for this run. But so far, and it seems like the only version of the cattle knife is the oxblood jig bone. And here is the tube art. Pretty cool, kind of classic tube art, very like ranch style. And here is the knife, so let's take a look at it. First of all, this oxblood jig bone is very cool looking. I really like it. I am not always the biggest fan of this kind of straight line jigging, but I think that it looks really good on this. This propeller shield is what I believe this is called. If anybody, if that's wrong, I'm sure somebody can correct me, and I'll make a note in the description. Has Tiddy Ute on it, which I appreciate. Tiddy Ute's a town, near GEC and near where I live. Camp there sometimes, so kind of cool to see that. And really good very dark red to this bone. It's kind of blood colored, to be honest. And I think it looks great. The other thing is that this knife is really beautifully made. So there's no gaps, super solid, all steel construction, and the blades are fit really well into the handle. So I haven't had any scratching or rubbing. I haven't opened this a whole lot. I haven't used or carried this one yet, but so far no rubbing between the blades. The tip of this spear point sits really nice and deep there, but it doesn't seem to have any blade wrap. So the pull is, I would say, maybe a 6 or even a 7, but you can see it has cattle knife, the etch on there. Again, a beautiful spear point blade with a long pull and a cut swedge. Tiddy Ute cutlery on one side, Great Eastern Cutlery Titusville PA on the other. And I don't feel or see any blade wrap. Now, the edges aren't the thinnest edges out there, but I don't think that it will develop any after I put an edge on it. And then it has a sheep foot, and Randy said in his video that this is the same sheep foot as on the Churchill. Now, I'm not sure if it's the same thickness and all of that, but it's the same, die, and really great classic looking sheep foot, especially for a cattle knife. Then finally, there is a spay blade, classic spay blade, really just as classic as it gets, and they all have about the same pull, great snap, and just really impeccably made. This is one of the best made GECs that I can remember. Just really nice. To be completely honest, it's really beautiful. The only downside I would say to this is that there isn't a huge amount of access to the nail nick of the spay blade, but to be honest, I don't use the spay blade on a knife all that often, and so I don't mind that a whole lot. I think even, to be honest, as a collector piece, when I first got this, the kind of main thing that I thought was, this is one of those knives that people are going to look back 50 or 100 years from now, and this is going to be one of the ones that's really sought after. I really think that these are a beautiful and exemplary example. That's kind of redundant, but a beautiful example of the quality that GEC can produce. So I was really happy with this one. I got both of these from Collector Knives. I thought these were going to be really tough to get, so I tried to get them as hard as I could and was able to get these two. Like I said, hoping to get the Charlie Companion SFO. But really happy with this one. I think it's a beautiful, really perfectly made knife, and the only thing is I wish there was a little bit more access to that. Now, real quick, I want to show you a comparison again to this knife. So this is a Cuban Stockman, and the main difference between a Stockman and a cattle knife usually is the main blade shape. So on a Stockman, the main blade is usually a clip point, whereas on a cattle knife it's often or usually a spear point. One thing about these two knives in particular is that on this Cuban Stockman, you can see that the nail nick is on the show side on the sheep foot, whereas on the 35 cattle knife, it is on the pile side. Both are things that you see pretty commonly. I would say that, again, as far as I have seen, it's more common for the nail nick to be on the show side on a Stockman. And that's just because of the shape of a clip point, allowing for that sheep foot to be accessible from the front. You can see on this knife that I did add this cutout here is like kind of quasi easy open notch is something I added. And I think if you were to use and sharpen this cattle knife, it might be something where you might want to end up adding that. But again, I see this knife as such a beautiful kind of collector's piece. I'm not sure that I will carry and use it, but if you did, you might want to add that kind of notch to it. So that is the cattle knife, and we can move on to the camp knife. So the camp knife is the 35-2322, same pattern number, even though it has different blades, in black textile. First of all, textile, textured Delrin. That's what that means, I believe. So it is a textured or a jigged synthetic, but textile is just kind of a cool name for it, I guess. And it's very traditional for a camp knife. A lot of vintage camp knives had black jigged synthetic handles. So while a lot of people don't like synthetic handles, I think it's very traditional, and I do appreciate it. Now here is the 2-Bart Good as Gold trademark, and you can see that it's called Johnny on the Spot, or at least the has this etch on the blade, which you'll see. And you can see Johnny there has that same kind of insignia that is on the shield. Sorry if the camera's a little shaky. And, June or whoever is looking at the knife here, and it seems like Johnny might be fixing the bike or whatever. So I don't know what the whole story behind that is, but that is kind of what it's called, is the Johnny on the Spot. And it is, honestly, it's a camp knife, but it's somewhat of a kind of, I don't know, tinkering knife also, and you'll see why in a second here. But first of all, I really like this textile. I think that it's really cool looking. Some people said that they thought that the jigging was too shallow, but I think it looks really great. There is a little bit of roughness on mine, kind of right here and here, as you can see. But again, no gaps, really, really beautifully put together. There are some gaps around the shield, as you can see, some gapping around the shield. Something that's honestly pretty common on GEC knives, so not a big surprise there. Sometimes they fill it in with like epoxy or something like that, but they didn't here. And then you can see it has this, I think they call this a federal shield. It might be a badge. I don't really have all of them memorized, to be completely honest. Someone can tell me the correct and I can put it in the description, but with a lightning bolt there. Now, the blades, again, fit in the handle really well. I haven't, again, used this one or carried it yet, but so far, no bad rubbing. And it has the same spear point. And another thing that Randy mentioned in his video is that Bill did say that this is his favorite blade, this spear point. So it's a very nice looking spear point, and you can see that Johnny on the Spot etch there. Pretty cool. I wish that I knew more if there was like an actual story behind this, but I haven't seen it anywhere. I'll email or maybe call Joan May at GEC and see if there's a full story behind it or just something they came up with, and I'll update the description if there is a story. Now, I might be wrong on this, but I think that this stamp looks a little different than I've seen before. It looks like it might be a new stamp, but either way, it says Great Eastern Cutlery, Titusville, PA on the back there. Then, and the pull on this one is again about a 7. Very snappy. Now, this spear point, this blade does not sit as low as on the cattle knife. I wish it did sit a little lower. But you could drop the kick if you wanted to. Then this knife also has a can opener. Now, I personally use a can opener pretty frequently. I eat food from can relatively frequently. I really like, in particular, if you are a fan of 3-bean salad, Aldi has a really good 3-bean salad that I like to take with my lunch. It's something you can have in your car if you need a snack or something like that. And I have used the can opener on the number 98 camp knife a lot. But there's a big difference between this can opener on the 98 and the can opener on the 35. So you can see that the can opener on the 98 is much longer and the angle is different between the two. That's because this one on the 98 is made long so that it can also be a bottle opener or a cap lifter. It's a combination tool, can opener and cap lifter, and works really well, to be honest. I do kind of wish that that's what they had done on the 35, because I do appreciate being able to do both on one tool. But this knife is, or this blade is just a can opener. It's only made to open cans. Now, of course, you could use it for other things, like, you know, if you wanted to be rough with a knife, you know, kind of prying and things like that. But it's made to just be a can opener. Now, moving on to the next tool, this one is really interesting, something new for Great Eastern Cutlery. This one is a bottle opener. Now, to be completely honest, I don't really use a bottle opener or a cap lifter very often. In fact, I definitely use a can opener rather than a cap lifter much more often than a cap lifter. But I think it's a nice thing to include on a camp knife for sure, very traditional. And then it also has the screwdriver here, which you could use as a screwdriver. If you do, just make sure you try to hold onto the blade or the tool and not onto the handle so you don't loosen the pivot. And you could use it to pry a little bit also, but again, definitely, you know, hold on to the tool rather than the handle. But the addition here is this 1/4-inch bit holder. Now this is really interesting, really unique, not something that I have seen before on vintage knives. Certainly it could be, but it's not something I have seen. More so something you see on a modern multi-tool, like a Leatherman, or, you know, there's a lot of one-piece multi-tools that have this kind of 1/4-inch bit holder. It's a really interesting addition. I don't really use 1/4-inch bits all that often, and when I do, I usually am using them with a, you know, a cordless drill, or, you know, just a full-on normal screwdriver. So I really don't think that I would use that often, and it's what kind of makes it to me more of like a, I don't know, maintenance tinkerer's knife, something like that, rather than a camp knife. But very interesting, very unique. For me, I do like the blades that were on the 98 better. The 98 has a clip point, really big, nice clip point, a sheep foot, and then the combination tool, can opener, cap lifter, and then finally an awl. And I love this knife. I've used it a lot. This is the Charlie Campagna SFO version. You can see that I got my initials put on it. Really, really love that knife. And I do think that I prefer those tools, but this is still a really cool knife and really unique. And I'm just happy that they have finally made a camp knife on this 35 frame. It's something that a lot of people have wanted for a long time, so it's great to see it actually come to fruition. Now, like I said, I don't know if there will be more versions. It doesn't really seem like there will be more versions, but they are still being released. I'm going to try to get this video out the day that I make it. So there are still a few retailers that haven't released these, so make sure you go to GEC's website, find the dealers list, and you know, subscribe to as many as you can, email them, whatever you need to do to try to get them. And I hope you're able to get one of these knives if you would like to. I certainly hope I am able to get the Charlie Campagna SFO version. But either way, if you've enjoyed this video, I'd love to hear your thoughts on these knives. Leave a comment below. Also, make sure you give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Click the bell and select all so you know when I post new videos. Go to my website, knifethoughts.com, where I post articles on knives like this and knife-related topics. And last but not least, as always, don't forget to go out and do good.